Obviously, we got to move forward. I think that was probably the biggest message after the game, and then on Sunday when we came in, that we cannot allow this to linger. Losses are tough. One like that was really tough. It was great atmosphere, a great environment and things like that at night, and it was a battle. But you can't allow it to linger, and you got to kind of flush it down and move on and learn. And there's a lot of things to learn from, but begin to move forward and try to really recognize that we got 4 guaranteed games. We got 1 month guaranteed to us left in the season, and we got to find ways to continue to grow and get better. I know I've said it over and over and over again, but best teams play the best ball at the end of the year, and November is what you really have always kind of talked about. So your ability to, whatever the situation, find a way consistently to play your best ball at the end of the year has been an emphasis since we started in the spring, and then was an emphasis when we started in fall camp, and was a big emphasis on Sunday for us, that this is what we've been talking about. This is the final stretch. We've got a lot of things that are sitting right in front of us, and now we've got an opportunity for ourselves to go and take something that we want. And so that's kind of where we are. There's obviously a lot of questions just, with health-wise of some things and some guys, but we won't know a whole lot about that. We kind of had a meeting this morning and say, look, whatever we've got to move forward, and we got to go out there, have a great day on Tuesday and a great day on Wednesday, and make sure we're well prepared for, what we're going to see on Saturday.
Questions?
Yeah.
Start with the health one. With Braylon and Chim, did you learn anything the last day and a half or so about?
No, don't know a whole lot. They were out of practice on Sunday. Didn't do a whole lot, but it's only Monday, so we'll have to find out some things as we move forward in the week.
Luke, how do you feel about the development of and state of your defense right now heading into this final month?
Well, I think they've grown a lot. I think that obviously they can nitpick, and there's some different areas and different things. I think the unique thing that they've been challenged with is finding a way to do some things different each and every week based on what guys do really well. And I wouldn't say we were established from the very get-go that this is who we are and this is what we want to do. I think that more than anything, defensively, they've probably evolved more from what we thought, what maybe even I thought we would be to start off the year, to where we are right now. But they're doing some things really well, and there's some things they got to do better. But I think all in all, I think they're getting a lot out of us right now. And those guys played physical, played hard on Saturday night. But you always got to outplay the other team's defense, and when that doesn't happen, you don't ever feel good.
Luke, obviously you mentioned still a ways to go in the week in terms of what you know about availability of players. But if you don't have Braylon, you obviously don't have Ches already. How does this run game succeed and offensively without 3,000-yard rusher and what Ches brought as well?
Yeah, I think that you're going to have to rely upon Jackson Aker, Cade Yakimelli. You're going to have to, trust that those guys are here for a reason. Trust that those guys, the things that they did in spring football and the things that they did in fall ball, they just haven't had as many opportunities. But I think it's going to come down to believing in what you do, put a little more pressure on the offensive line to get some things done and to create some more space and things like that, and then give those guys an opportunity to play. That's a part of, unfortunately, what we're dealing with. But that's why we got to have a really good Tuesday and a really good Wednesday and get those guys ready for whatever we will need on Saturday.
Can you talk a little bit about how much the pass defense has stepped up, specifically Ricardo Hallman, over these last couple of weeks, and just some of the things he's done this year?
Yeah, I think they've been really opportunistic. I think they've done a really good job. We've had to mix some things up a bit more, I think, maybe than we had done in the past, or even what we thought we would have to do. And sometimes that makes it a little bit more difficult to be consistent. And I think that, like we talked about with Rico from the end of spring football, at the end of fall camp, and even now, that the thing that he has been more than anything is consistent opportunities to make plays when they've come his way, which he obviously continues to do and did it on Saturday night. But I think that's where I think we've gotten a lot better from game one to where we are right now in different ways, to just say, hey, we aren't just going to have to be able to line up on guys and man cover them all the time. We're going to have to be able to change some things up and switch some things up and give us an opportunity to, allow our guys to play but be confident in what they're doing.
Just wondering, this new TV contract, there seems
Don't
to
know
be
much about it.
Well, it seems to be allowing more mid-November, late November night games in the Big Ten that we haven't had in the past. I don't know if you're going to end up having any of those this year, but how do you feel about the possibility of playing some night games later in the year that haven't been happening in the Big Ten?
I don't know that it really matters how I feel. They tell us when we play and they tell us at what time we play. So it's kind of one of those things like how much time do I spend, thinking about what's best for us or for me when it's something that's completely out of our control for the most part. I don't know. I mean, with nights like was Saturday night, if we create those kinds of environments, there's nothing better for college football. So if that means we have to play at night, it's not the easiest thing for a really, really long day, as a coach. And I'm sure as a player a little bit too. I don't know as much of what it's like as a player, I think. I mean, they didn't play a whole lot of night games in the Big Ten when I was in school. But I know that we all love the atmospheres. I know we all love the environments that are created in some of those games like last night or Saturday night. But, again, they tell us when to play, and I don't get a whole lot into – I got a lot of other things that probably take a lot more of my energy and will have a greater effect on. I don't have a control of the weather either. I'm learning as I go a little bit different, that you can get a bunch of different things, whether it's here or we're – somewhere around Chicago or any place in the Big Ten, to be honest with you. It is what it is.
Say, Luke, I know he's a name that's been asked a few times this year already, but Jake Renfro, just what's his status and what's the staff's criteria potentially to, where he's at right now and if there's potential for him to get on the field in these final 4 games?
Yeah, there's potential for a lot of guys to get on the field in these final 4 games. There's a potential for a lot of young guys to get on the field in these final 4 games, even those guys that haven't played at all, with the rule of, allowing young guys that they got 4 games. So there could be some situations where we start to throw some guys in maybe special teams or even, in where we are with injuries. You can see some younger guys getting some greater opportunities. Jake's obviously different than that. He's not a young guy. But I think that the consistency of what we have to do up front kind of holds him back a little bit in where we are with just kind of rolling some of those guys in there. We've had enough, inconsistencies with, some nicks and bruises and things like that we've been fortunate, at least up front. We haven't had as much of that, so that's kind of one of the stabilizing factors that make it a little bit harder to get Jake probably some reps that he deserves.
When you're on the practice field this week, what are red flags for you if you think the loss is lingering in the mind of certain players? What do you look for to make sure you can nip it in the bud on the practice field?
Well, I just think it's body language and demeanor, and it starts with us as coaches. I think that we've got to be the example for what it is that we need to do. I think our kids in general, they've been through a lot of ups and downs, right? I mean, most of the guys that have been in this program have been through ups and downs, and they handle it pretty well. Sometimes you got to look at yourself as the ones that don't handle some of these things quite as well. And, when I preach to those guys or when I say those things to those guys, I'm really talking to myself in a lot of ways. And so, it starts with me. It starts with the coaches, and it's harder to tell on the young guys because I think that they do a pretty good job of kind of washing things past and moving on, just in general. It's the outside things that the human element creeps in. I don't think it's the game as much as it is some of the other things with those guys. But those are things that doesn't matter the week, right? I'm always trying to watch and trying to evaluate and make sure we know where our guys are more than anything, going into every week.
You were asked about Ricardo Hallman on the field, but it seems like him and Darrell Peterson have a pretty tight relationship off the field. And you talk about relationships being so important to your program. What have you learned about those two guys in particular since you've taken over?
I don't quite know who everybody lives with and who they all hang with. I think, the times you see them here in the facility, you can kind of get a little bit of a grasp, but, we do so much in units, even in the weight room and the lifting stuff like that. It's not as easy to figure out how all those guys kind of hang. But that's what I would say about these guys in general. Even in the midst of, Saturday night after the game in the locker room, you kind of are always walking and watching, and you can see, how these guys pick each other up, how they take care of each other, how they really got each other's back. those two guys in particular might be, guys that off the field spend a lot more time together. I know the offensive line in general lives together, that spend an incredible amount of time together. And those kinds of relationships are examples to our entire locker room. I think that we're built and made to have relationships, and we try to make our program as difficult as we possibly can so guys have to rely upon their relationships, because I think that's what makes us all stronger.
Luke, Preston Zachman's a guy that's played maybe more than fans and media expected going into this year, and obviously he had the big pick on Saturday. Just what have you seen from his development this season?
I think that his ability to play a lot of different spots, I think that he's a guy that kind of gets moved around, but can handle it, can still play consistent, can still play fast and aggressive, whether he's in there a nickel, whether he's just more of a base guy, whether, in some of the other situations he plays in the dollar package, something different. He's done nothing but continue to impress us. I think that that's sometimes where, a guy like him could struggle, meaning like one week his role might be this, and the next week it might be a little bit different. Another week it might be, more in the special teams. But every time we, continue to adapt and adjust his role, he continues to grow. And another one of those guys, like we talk about, Rico, that just is very consistent in what he does, and gives you as a coach the opportunity to, to be able to change and do and move around some things.
Just curious what you've seen from Indiana. Obviously, playing Penn State pretty tough, and then off that, they had a couple of big plays. What's kind of your message been about trying to limit big plays like that to keep scores from happening?
Yeah, I mean, they had two giant ones in last week's game, which obviously gave them an incredible amount of momentum and made that game a really tight game. And so whatever, a 70-yarder and a 68-yard, I mean, two of them that can be game changers, and that's where we can't. I mean, when we've had some issues, just like on Saturday night, the bigger plays have been things that have been a little bit of Achilles heel for us, in particular defensively, make some really good plays, and then by nature, unfortunately, give up some of the bigger ones. So going on the road, you're going to have to do a great job. I think this is a team that's creating and generating some momentum. I think they're playing better. I think they're into a rhythm a little bit more offensively than maybe they were in the first 5 games as they made the switch. But it's going to be about special teams. It's going to be about making sure we can eliminate big plays and creating them some way, somehow for us offensively.
Luke, now that you've had the opportunity to kind of go back and review the film, what about Braden's performance? Actually, can you just kind of grade how he handled the whole environment? It's a game that fans circle. How do you think, it's only his second start. How do you think he handled it?
No, I think you're seeing the consistency that he has. I think the way that which he's prepared has given him this opportunity. He did a couple little things that they gave me. He had a really big run for us that was huge. The touchdown pass to Will, he had to kind of improvise a little bit, create some more time, and then keep his eyes down the field. So there's a lot of things he's doing really well. It's one thing to be a young quarterback and to have some stability around you. It's another thing to be a young quarterback and have not much stability around you. So I think we're giving him every possible trying situation and adverse situation that we can, that in the long run is going to do nothing but make him even stronger.
Coach, I just want to get your thoughts on C.J. Williams, his development. What stands out to you as far as how he's been coming along?
He's doing a good job. He's a guy that's kind of played both wide receivers for us. I think he's got to continue to, take advantage of the opportunities that he gets. I think he had a catch or two Saturday night. But I think that, there's still some things that we've got to, put him in some situations, give him some more opportunities. But like we tell the guys, you earn your opportunities and you earn the chances that you get. And I don't want him just to be, and I know he's not satisfied with just, hey, this is my role. I kind of sub on both edges, and I'm the next guy to go in. He's going to have to continue to be a guy that can make some plays for us, and when those balls come his way, I know we took a shot to him. I think right after the long punt return that is what it is, right? He's not open. We don't end up connecting on anything like that. But I think that would show you that we've got enough confidence in him to put him in those situations and to give him that chance, in a really big moment right there.
You mentioned, I think, a couple weeks ago that you want the wide receivers to make your quarterback look good. If the ball,
I always say that. That's one of their number one jobs.
Yeah. Were there some balls in Saturday's game, probably like there are every week, that they had their hands on that you expect them to come down with?
Yeah, I mean, I expect my 9-year-olds at home, if they touch the ball, to catch it, right? I mean, it's what we say, right? You touch it, you clutch it. I mean, yeah, but we all know that there's going to be things that happen, and you got to be able to move on. I think some of the ones that have, caused us a little bit more anxiety or angst is in the big situations, the third down stuff that, you're hoping and expecting those guys to maybe come down with it. But you got to be able to move forward. You got to be able to, continue to build the confidence, to continue to give them their opportunities and their chances. And we've seen it, but I don't know that it's abnormal. It's just how do we handle it and how do we move forward, and can we not allow them to compound each other? When you get a game like that where the margin of error is really minimal, the length on the other side and the athleticism on the other side is, different than maybe you see every single week. The windows are tighter. The balls are going to have to be thrown a little bit harder. And I think those are all things that you practice, but, you probably don't actually recognize and realize until you get into those games and those moments that, it becomes a lot more difficult.
So, Luke, looking at the participation index, looks like there's 3 true freshmen that have earned their red shirt this year already. But just for those 2 that have traveled, but that maybe not even played yet, just what does being on a travel roster and experience, what does that do for true freshmen, whether they're playing or not?
Hopefully they're learning an incredible amount. I mean, the environments, the atmospheres, the adverse situations, like if those guys aren't taking those things in, seeing the preparation, seeing what a Friday night looks like, seeing how you prepare on a Saturday morning based on when your game is, like those are invaluable things. Being at home and not being with the team is difficult. I think that's one of those things that if I was to change something, I'd say don't limit your roster on what you can take, and not say you take everybody. But you want those guys to have some of those experiences so when they're thrown into that game or they're thrown into that travel, they understand how to handle all those things. Not just how they handle the actual game, but how they handle the entire travel, how they handle the entire business trip.
Luke, we talked to Hunter after the game, and you could tell that there was disappointment in losing, but it seems like he's just a guy that's able to maintain his steadiness regardless of situation. How kind of central to who he is, do you think that kind of...
Well, it's really big, too, because I think the official asked him not to hit him or wrap him on the game, which I got to check on, and most people would lose their mind if an official said that, but Hunter just kind of continued to move on. It just shows you a little bit of his personality. He doesn't get rattled. He doesn't get too high or too low, and I think that's a really unique thing for a guy that plays as much ball as he does, and you need that with your big time players, because you don't want them in the moment to wear themselves or burn themselves out as much as we ask him to do. If he was a really overly emotional guy, I think he'd have a hard time doing all the things we ask him to do and move him from spot to spot based on what's going on, obviously with health wise for some guys. So he's a unique individual that obviously is a really good football player, but with all those things being said, like his maturity, his ability to handle everything that you throw at him emotionally, whether it's on a Saturday or during the week of prep, he is a really, really unique, good player, great player. I don't exactly. I got to ask him a little bit on that, but I think we ran into the ref, which I still don't understand. I still don't understand why we have an official where we have him. The NFL got rid of the guy back there. I mean, it's we collide with the official on the touchdown. And not that it would have stopped it or we would have eliminated it, but like there's some things I think that we still have got to figure out, within our game, but for a much different time.
On Saturday, Tanner didn't have anything on his hand. Can we get an update on his rehab, and do we have any timeline?
I got no updates for you. He doesn't wrap it. I think we'll see. It comes down to a lot to what Tanner can do, but I don't know that I've got any deadlines on him. I don't know that I've got any guidelines on him. I just think that it's one of those ones that we're going to have to see and play by ear as we continue to move forward.